Takes with him a lot more than just his career. And Night Beat Jerry Springer has some thoughts on Johnny's retirement. Jerry?
Thanks, Norma. The moment of Johnny Bench's retirement is worth noting, not just because of his individual achievements, which will one day place him in the Hall of Fame, but because when Johnny Bench leaves, so will an era in 20th century American mythology. The age of the American sports hero is quickly passing. Now, no one's suggesting that Johnny Bench was necessarily the greatest player who ever played. He was probably not even the best of his time, and there are likely to be better ones in the future. But what Johnny Bench was, for hundreds of thousands of folks in this area, was a hero. No, he didn't stop a war, save a sinking ship, or find a cure for a dreaded disease. He simply played a game better than most, but he played it for our town, and he played it with class. More often than not, he won. It is the stuff of which heroes are made, finding victory where defeat seems more probable. Life offers few opportunities for victory, so we often grab them vicariously through our sports. As kids, every time we walk out on the sandlot field or toss the ball against the side of the house until our mother tells us to stop, we become Johnny Bench, stepping up to the plate in the bottom of the ninth to jack one into the green seats in left and win the game for the once grand Big Red Machine. He is our hero because he gave us victories when real life offered so few. He is our hero because we could identify with him. When he went to work, he wore our name on his shirt, Cincinnati. And that is the day that is passing in sports. There are great athletes today, but they are hard for kids to identify with because they don't stay put. They are merely hired professionals signing a 3-year contract with a local franchise and then playing out their option and moving on to another team in another city where the grass is greener, or at least the dollars are. Hero worship is an affair of the heart, but today our would-be heroes leave too quickly and too often to be loved. We don't want to be hurt, so we don't grow too attached. When we were growing up, Sandy Koufax was a Dodger, Stan Musial a Cardinal, Mickey Mantle a Yankee. But the day of his superstar coming up through the system and spending his entire career with one city in any professional sport is over. Johnny Bench may be one of the last of them, which is why his leaving is particularly sad. Heroes are fun to have, and we'll miss him. Norma?
Thank you, Jerry.
I'm Jerry Springer. The world changed, so we shouldn't be surprised that our colleges did too. We'll talk about it. I'm not God, nor am I a theologian.
Fine. He's not here, of course, to celebrate his 50th birthday. He wouldn't have been if no one had the chance to see that. Our defiance, our youth, our naivety, and our vulnerability. What we remember most about Elvis is not the fact that he died, but we are reminded about the fact of when he was young and when he was young. We'll always remember Elvis. Norma?
Have you heard what Jerry Springer's been saying?
On stopping terrorists.
I don't see how we can interpret these brutal assaults on American citizens as anything but an attack on the United States.
On Cincinnati's residency law.
It's what an employee does while on the job that counts, not where he happens to bed down with his family at night.
On school prayer.
Well, it just doesn't matter. Those who want to pray will, those who don't, won't.
Jerry Springer's commentary on News 5 at 11. People make the difference. Have you heard what Jerry Springer's been saying?
About the home state crisis.
It's enough to make any politician start thinking about life in the private sector.
On stopping terrorists.
We know where they are. We know who they are. It's time to go in and get them.
On Cincinnati's rich and famous.
There are ways to tell whether or not someone's in the socialite's blue book. If he or she cancels a dinner engagement because it's bowling night, they're not in it.
Jerry Springer's commentary, weeknights at 11 on News 5. People make the difference.
Is striking baseball's national pastime? Commentary tonight.
Well, there is only one possible subject for Jerry to do his commentary on tonight. Pete Rose, right, Jerry?
Thanks, Norma. I was watching along with what seemed like the rest of humanity, the greatest hit of all time, cheering madly like everyone else, and then suddenly he cried. Standing there alone at first base on top of the world by way of his 4,192nd hit, Pete Rose cried and hugged his kid, and suddenly it all made sense. The mass hysteria and pandemonium that has surrounded this quest of Cobb had nothing to do with baseball after all. It was simply life, the victory of the human spirit. It's tempting at moments such as this to overstate the case. This is not the greatest thing that ever happened. It will not affect history. There are people who face far more serious struggles every day and must look at this as nothing more than a great athletic achievement. But when I saw macho tough Pete Rose standing there alone in the midst of 5 uninterrupted minutes of adulation suddenly reduced to tears, it came to me. We were bearing witness to a circumstance of which there are no parallels, at least none that I can think of. We were watching an ordinary human being, after a lifetime of uncompromising dedication, finally achieve the ultimate height of his calling. And he did it with all the world watching and all the world there to say, well done. The record will last forever, as will our remembrance of the moment. Look, we will never do what he did. No one ever has. And we all suddenly realized that, which is why we cheered, why he cried, and for one brief shining moment, why we all felt the glory of when the human spirit prevails. Look at the end of if Soviet government would so quickly admit that there's been a nuclear accident.
Q. Clyde.
Earlier tonight, we told you how the abortion controversy has heated
Ready,
up
Kim
in our
to
time
one.
with today's discovery of what appeared to be a pipe bomb outside the Margaret Sanger abortion clinic.
Q, take one.
The community response to that
One ready, zoom to
is
Jerry.
the subject of Jerry's commentary tonight. Jerry, thanks.
One zoom.
Now, in all
Resolve his
fairness,
name,
most anti-abortion folks don't condone the outlaw violence of a pipe bomb, real or hoax. However, in private conversations, more than a few will tell you that though the clinic bombings are wrong, the abortions that take place every day within the clinics, well, that's violence too, and that's just as bad. So we shouldn't be surprised if one kind of violence invites another. This argument, of course, ignores the fact that whatever you may think of abortion, in America, it is legal. And bombing buildings or people
I doubt
isn't.
seriously they're going to
So the
save
two can't be
Washington
compared.
snow. Let's
In
use
any
that
event,
tape.
despite the argument of violence begetting violence, of abortion inviting bombings, the fact is most Americans view the bombings as extreme, as an irrational response to abortion. And the fact that they do may point out why the fight to have abortion declared illegal in our country has so far failed. Let me explain. As you know, we have tens of thousands of abortions each year. Well, imagine, if you will, if tens of thousands of, let's say, 5-year-olds were being executed each year. Certainly no one would be complaining if a pipe bomb were placed outside the building where those executions were taking place. Why, that person would be considered a national hero. The people committing the executions would be charged with murder, and anybody in government or elsewhere suggesting that executing 5-year-olds be legal would be strung up from the highest tree. But of course there is no such public reaction to the notion of abortion. Because regardless of your personal view, you must admit most Americans
Ready to
don't
dissolve his name
believe
out. Ready to push
a
in on
fetus is
one.
yet a person, or abortion is the same thing as killing a born baby.
Dissolve. Push in.
And because most Americans don't believe that, that's why abortion remains legal. And those who would bomb clinics to make their point are viewed as nothing less than criminal extremists. You see, the abortion battle is over whether the fetus is human. And a bombing is a futile and sick way to demonstrate anyone's humanity.
Fade to black.
Earlier tonight, we told you of the expected departure of White House Chief of Staff Don Regan, a move that has been pushed recently by the First Lady, Nancy Reagan. Will his leaving matter? Well, that's the subject of Jerry's commentary tonight. Jerry?
Thanks, Clyde. If you got a choice, marry the president. Don't be his chief of staff. Because if things get tough, presidents rarely fire their wives. It's bad politics. Donald Reagan is finding that out, as he's about to lose his battle with Nancy. And so in a scenario that will be given as much dignity as this messy Iran-Contra affair will now allow, Donald Reagan will bite the dust by the end of the week, thereby giving President Reagan his last shot at saving his presidency from scandal and lame duckness. The fact is, Nancy's probably right. Don Reagan has made a mess of her husband's second term. He's certainly a political liability, and until he's gone, the president isn't going to get anyone to pay attention to the other things he wants to get done in his final 2 years in office. But there's a question that won't go away even after Reagan's gone, as he's expected to be by the end of the week. And even after the Tower Commission releases its report on Thursday, which is expected to hit the president and the administration real hard. And it has nothing to do with scandal, or who knew what and when. It's the more serious question of the president's memory, and whether his failing memory is a function of age. Look, this is not a matter of choosing up sides on our president. We can love him and love everything he's done. But he is 76, holding the world's most stressful job. And he wouldn't be the first 76-year-old to start forgetting things. And he is forgetting things. Indeed, after conflicting testimony as to whether or not he gave permission to sell arms to Iran in exchange for hostages, President Reagan now says he doesn't remember. Well, assuming he's telling the truth, that's no laughing matter. What other major items of foreign policy is he not remembering? And why isn't he writing it down so he won't forget? And what else is his staff keeping from him? By the way, who's running this country anyway? I mean, considering all the attention that's been paid to Iran and terrorism and the Middle East over the past several years, the idea that he can't remember if he okayed an arms deal to Iran is downright incredible. It raises the question we've all been afraid to ask in polite company, which is not whether the Iran-Contra affair is getting old, but whether our president is. That's a tough question, but it's an honest one.
Zimmer's conversion to a coal-fired plant will continue to raise controversy in our area. Jerry has some thoughts on today's decision in his commentary tonight.
Thanks, Toria. When Zimmer was first proposed, there was great fear about the building of a nuclear power plant in our area. But as it turns out, of course, more people died of boredom over the issue than radiation. For as a reality, Zimmer got nuked, victimized by mismanagement and inadequate attention to public safety concerns. It is the nuclear power plant that never was, sitting idly by in Moscow, Ohio, a concrete monument to failure, having produced literally no energy other than the 15 years of litigation and meetings and marches over what that plant should or should not be. Indeed, the mere burnings of the legal brief should be enough to heat our town for a generation. And though this white elephant will now never even give us a kilowatt of nuclear-produced power, the debate still rages on over what to do with it. That question is relevant because so far $1.7 billion has been spent. Now, CG&E has been leading the charge to convert this never-used facility into a coal-fired plant. On the surface, that seems eminently reasonable. We'll need energy in our future. Nuclear power is now either too expensive or too dangerous or too unreliable. So let's see if we can turn this mistake into an energy-producing coal-fired plant. But there may have been cheaper solutions. There's been significant testimony and evidence that it'd be much cheaper to build a coal plant from scratch rather than trying to convert the boondoggle of Zimmer over to coal. It may also be significantly cheaper for CG&E to purchase power over the grid system on a long-term contract. Experts believe that's available, and it's a lot less costly than building a new plant that would only last 25 years anyway. Also, with major plants such as GM leaving the area, we may be facing a declining usage base, which means we don't need a huge power plant, all of which raises the question. If these possible solutions are cheaper, why does CG&E push to convert Zimmer to coal? Here's one possibility. If they don't convert Zimmer, then CG&E and the other utility owners will have to pick up the whole $1.7 billion loss. But if they do convert it, even though that may be a more expensive solution, they can pass a major portion of the cost on to you and me, the consumer. And there we have it. You see, the issue has never been making power. It's making money.
By 1987, the 43-year-old newsman was regularly being named Best TV Anchor in Cincinnati.
So, as I thank you tonight for the Best Anchor honor, as well as for accepting me in this dual role, I also must thank my bosses. First, because they deserve it. Second, because they may be watching. And thirdly, if
Jerry enjoyed his local celebrity.
Springer, a former news anchor himself, calls Maureen's decision arrogant.
She won
years through his second career as a TV anchorman.
8 days ago, the bus drivers went on strike.
Despite no TV experience, Springer's editorials made his station #1.
Saturday's run-in with an umpire down at Riverfront Stadium raises questions as to whether the punishment Pete got was all that appropriate. That's the subject of Jerry's commentary tonight. Jerry.
Thanks, Norma. Admittedly, it was hard to tell who the home team was, whether in fact this game was being played in Cincinnati or New York. And based on all the debris that was flying out of the stands in the general direction of baseball's worst umpire, New York would have been a good guess. But of course it wasn't. It was quiet old conservative Cincinnati going bonkers. And let's be honest, I don't care how big a fan you are, no one with any sense can justify the insanity of such acts, of trying to, or at least raising the possibility of inflicting serious bodily harm on a person because of a simple game. There's no room for throwing stuff. That's totally unacceptable. But now, having admitted that that certainly didn't make our town look real good, let's talk about what started all this and the National League president's ridiculous response. The root cause starts with Pallone, in my opinion, a totally incompetent umpire with no more business being on the field than I do. I mean, anybody can miss a call, but then delaying decisions so as runs can score and games can be lost. And there's been a whole history of this kind of a performance and run-ins with the Reds. Well, Major League Baseball, considering the price of tickets these days, has a responsibility to put only professionals on the field who don't disrupt through their incompetence and arrogance our national pastime. Arrogance? You got it. He blows the game, Pete goes out to argue, which is well within his rights, and umpire Pallone jabs him in the face. So Pete, as most humans would, shoves back. Not a response that will win him the Nobel Peace Prize, but at least understandable in light of the poke in the face. The outrage here is, considering the provocation, the length of the suspension. The fact that it was issued without first having a hearing where Pete could be heard. And where, oh, where is the punishment for the umpire? Since when may they hit ball players? And now National League President Giamatti summons Marty and Joe to New York because he thinks their comments on radio incited the crowd. Ridiculous. All they did was tell the truth. The umpire stinks. Well, now I'm saying it. Summon me to New York. Fact check.
The launch of the shuttle Discovery today is a big victory for American space technology, but it is also a victory of the American spirit. Jerry has some thoughts on that angle in his commentary. Jerry?
Thanks, Norma. You probably slept better than they did last night, but then again, they had a lot more to think about. At least they had a lot farther to go. And though they weren't worried about traffic or getting lost, they had to be thinking odds. Can it happen again? Will the shuttle reaching for the stars find eternity instead? And speeches about the rebirth of our space program and commitments to new frontiers aside, America this morning was affixed to the tube, holding its breath as if this were the first time it was ever tried, with primarily one thought, at least in the back of everyone's mind. 5, 4, 3. Oh, there the rocket's igniting. Look at that fireball. 2, 1. Oh, I hope it lifts off. 0, it's up. It looks steady. It seems to be okay. What's that? It's dropping its boosters. That's okay. It's supposed to do that. And we think of Krista McCauley and that terrible moment emblazoned on our minds. And I wonder if they're nervous. Oh, God, let them get up there. And in this world, and particularly in this effort, which is primarily the Super Bowl of technological achievement, the great irony in this wondrous display of computer and machine is that the moment that stops our hearts is not so much the power of the rocket thrust or the miracle of all those scientific formulas, but rather the simple courage of those 5 human beings who strapped themselves into the capsule for life's ultimate Olympic event, where you don't win or lose, you just win or die. That's what we're watching when we watch the launching of any space effort. For you see, it's not that space is the heart of the matter, but rather that space is ultimately a matter of the heart.
We all watched the liftoff of the shuttle Discovery today with a lump in our throat and with pride in our spirit. We soared as we saw the rocket lift off without a hitch. The launch has renewed our hope and patriotism, and that is the subject of Jerry's commentary tonight.
Thanks, Nola. National victories. They're hard to come by these days. I mean, there are no wins in war anymore, and not even Olympic basketball is a sure thing for us. So you could feel the nationalistic hunger for triumph as Discovery lifted off, the white to orange flame blasting from the rocket. Yet to us, it was all red, white, and blue. Pride, we're back in the race, the good old US of A, and how can you not feel good about it? But when the moment fades and the Discovery 5 are back at home and the news shifts to more earthly endeavors, the voice will inevitably be raised again. What price victory? How much for national pride? And in an age of suffocating deficits and promises of no new taxes, can we really afford the billions and billions to circle the earth we have such trouble living on simply for bragging rights on the Ruskies? No question, beating them in hockey was cheaper. But of course, even though the race to space is the thrill and the possible whipping of the Soviets is what gets our juices flowing, the reason to launch has to have a better justification. After all, this is hardly a cheap thrill we're talking about. And there is a better justification, a better rationale. And it's not just that
the child in all of us cries a bit tonight because a woman who never forgot a child and helped the rest of us remember has just passed without paying to a final reward. And she hasn't earned one, no one has. I never met her, but I knew her. I never saw her, but she was everywhere. She was everywhere I saw a child who was down and out. And if not in pain, certainly bewilderment. Why am I in this hospital? Will I be okay? When will I get out? And she wasn't a doctor or a scientist. But for tens of thousands of kids for a half-century now, she was the best of medicine. A toy, a smile. Hey, hang in there, kids. Somebody loves you. Things will work out. Ruth Lyons and a Children's Christmas Fund has become perhaps our community's most lasting and visible testament to the notion that we think about more than ourselves, that we care about others, particularly God's greatest gift, the children. We well know now what she's meant to the kids, but maybe her greatest gift was what she taught us grown-ups, from the homespun simplicity of a noontime television set, that life is best and most meaningful when we take care of each other. Let's be clear here, Ruth was a television personality. And today, in an age where so much of what we see on the tube is graphic passion, her magic, certainly more lasting, was compassion. She's been off the air now for some 20 years, and yet her works and her commitment have kept her a household name. In her final years in failing health, she couldn't take in much television. She probably couldn't get the full measure of how much she still matters to us. Well, tonight, in God's hands, maybe she can see us. And maybe now she truly knows. Thanks, Ruth, for making us all better.
Until the hearing is over.
Pulling your kid out of the Little League. The whole thing's starting to give more than a few of us a bad taste. Indeed, the lawyers have taken over baseball, and yesterday the Reds got more TROs than RBIs. It's crying shame. And it needn't be like this. It's time for less law and a little common sense. And see how easy this whole thing could be. I mean, what's the issue here? It's whether Pete bet on baseball or the Reds. And that's a no-no, and Pete knows it is. And there's a good reason for that, because if gamblers get too involved in the game, there'd be too much incentive to fix the game, and the integrity of baseball would be lost. So the rule's good. No betting on baseball. Well, did Pete bet on baseball? The investigator has put together his report. Pete now wants a chance to show that the report's all wrong. And he wants the case heard before an impartial judge. He doesn't think Giamatti's fair. He thinks he's already made up his mind prior to hearing Pete refute the evidence. Judge Nadel, at least to this point, agrees. Meanwhile, Baseball Commissioner Bart Giamatti says he is fair. He is impartial. He has not yet made up his mind about Pete. This is what the lawyers are arguing about. Well, is Giamatti biased, or can he be fair? Well, how about a little common sense here? Why doesn't Giamatti simply say, look, I'm as honest and fair as the day is long. I have not already determined that Pete is guilty. But since the most important thing here is finding the truth and preserving the integrity of baseball as well as Pete's rights, I'd like to avoid even the appearance of having been biased. I'd like to lift the cloud that will inevitably hover over this case no matter what decision I now reach. So, I'll step aside here, agree not to hear this case. And we'll have baseball appoint somebody else or an agreed-upon panel to hear the evidence, maybe a former federal judge or even a former president. If Bart Giamatti would just say that, he'd be a national hero overnight. He'd have put the game ahead of his pride. Pete would have no excuse for not going ahead with the hearing. Both sides would be heard. The issue would be out of court. The question of Pete's betting finally settled. And once again, we could play ball. It'd be less dollars for the lawyers, but more common sense for the game. Past their importance, but we persist because this is personal. Rock and roll's greatest performer will wear no crown, of course, but there's no championship to be fought over by contemporaries, no relevant statistics to be measured in terms of comparisons with past greats. Indeed, the title of rock's greatest is held only in our individual minds. And yet we argue intensely because it's our own history we're talking about. You see, whomever you think's the greatest, the chances are it's someone whose prime coincides with our youth. I suspect it's because our teens and young adult years are clearly when pop music is most significant to us. And maybe that's because that's when we're falling in love or trying to or dealing most vigorously with relationships. And the radio, or today MTV and CDs and tapes, become the background music to life. Indeed, for most Americans, their favorite performer probably is someone who was big in their senior year in high school. And yes, there must be exceptions, because I'm not willing to say Bobby Vinton singing Roses Are Red was the best ever. But generally, it's no accident that those who think Sinatra's the king are kind of older, and those who swear that Elvis still lives probably were teens in the 50s. And if it's Springsteen or Michael Jackson that gets the nod, we're looking at the class of the late 70s or early 80s. But let me settle the uncertainty with the same lack of objectivity I normally reserve for these commentaries.
by suggesting that the man who graced the stage of the Coliseum last night was part of the creative genius that made up the greatest musical group of the century, the greatest rock group of all time, the Beatles. Their music changed the industry, changed rock and roll, indeed changed Western culture in terms of style, attitudes, and the politics of youth. And 100 years from now, their music will still be played even by symphony orchestras who are already playing it. There have been better musicians, better singers, better writers. But nobody could do it all with such impact while leaving a mark of such longevity. There'll be no reunion tours, of course. A crazed assassin saw to that. But those of us old enough to remember can never forget that where music has always been the language of the generation, the Beatles were the one group that created and shaped a generation, which is why no concert ever sold out faster, and why when Paul McCartney sang yesterday, we knew it was forever. Even we become pretty defensive over the subject, so perhaps we shouldn't be too surprised at the response. Those for whom life is no longer a gift but a sentence, imposed not by the courts but by the fates in the guise of failing and often painful health, where recovery is not an option and the substance of life, mental or physical, has irreversibly passed, for them, a way out is a blessing. But if we open up the right to die to those who simply aren't what they used to be, where the substance of life seems lost, then where do you draw the line?
For Jerry Springer's commentary, turn to the team you know, News 5.
In commentary tonight, the success of the Reds and the 3-game winning streak of the Bengals have local sports fans on the edges of their seats. Jerry has some thoughts on how winning affects the community in his commentary tonight. Jerry?
Thanks, Norma. Maybe after a year of shame and disappointments of the Rose demise and Bengal mediocrity following a Super Bowl year and Stanley Wilson and would UC ever win again, maybe the Cincinnati sports world was due for a turnaround. And from famine to feast, could it really be Cincinnati, the city of champions? And this may well be the year. I was thinking about that while spending the weekend out in San Diego with the Reds, watching them sweep the Padres, burying the Dodgers in all the talk of choking in the process. While in the press box, word came over the ticker, Bengals trounced New England 41-7. They're 3-0. And suddenly it's not too silly to think of playoffs and pennants and a World Series and Super Bowl all in the same year. Eat your heart out, San Francisco. The torch has been passed to the middle of America. This is Cincinnati's year, the city of champions. And sure, the prospect's exciting, but why do so many of us care and get so worked up about it all? I mean, it's just a bunch of rich kids playing a game, and yet you can't help but notice the incredible impact professional sports is having on our town. And it's more than entertainment. It's that in modern America, professional sports is about the only vehicle left to demonstrate a positive sense of community. Oh, certainly if disaster strikes, a tornado hits, or a hurricane ravages a town, everybody pulls together and there's a real feeling of shared concern, a sense of community. But other than disasters, what happens or what do we do in our daily lives that brings us all together? If Kroger has a record year in profits, do we all rally on Fountain Square? Who-day, who-day, who-day think's going to beat them cost cutters? The fact is, we're all into our own lives, our own families, our own careers. But the one thing we all share is the nationally reported success or failures of the pro teams who carry our name. We dedicate a whole section in our daily newspapers to it, as we do our nightly broadcasts. We televise the games, listen to Marty and Joe on the radio. How many of us, at least once today, saw, read, or heard something about the Reds and Bengals? No, it isn't life and death, but it is our world. It's Cincinnati. And right now, we're looking and feeling pretty good. Play ball.
Springer began his television broadcasting career at WLWT in 1982 as a political reporter and commentator. After learning to report, he was in the anchor chair.
Well, we've been here a lot of election years, and it seems every election year, as we sit here at the end of an election night, we're surprised by something just about every year.
And this was the greatest surprise of all. I think when we take a look finally at the results, what we're going to find is that what the driving force in all of this was the school levy, and it started with the Binger Commission report. When the Binger Commission said there are reforms that had to be made, when the school board followed and endorsed those supports, when you had Michael Brandt as the superintendent taking the lead and said we're going to have discipline in our schools and we're going to reform the system, people bought into it, and we had a successful school levy. Well over, over 50% of Cincinnati public schools are the inner city, minority, black. Those people came out and voted in huge numbers, I think we will find. And the support for the school levy brought out voters that would support Dwight Tillery, that would support liberals, that would support people who are willing to spend money on the inner city. And I think what happened is that force behind the school levy drove Dwight Tillery to be the #1 vote getter, brought a city council of 3 women, 2 blacks, the most liberal we've had easily in a generation, perhaps forever. And I think that's what we're going to see with the final results. Cincinnati stood up and said, we want our schools and we want a liberal city council.
And tomorrow we will continue to analyze exactly what happened all day today, but that's our time for now. In commentary, civil rights leader Jesse Jackson recently visited Cincinnati. He is surely a voice for the poor, but will mainstream America pay any attention? It's the subject of Jerry's commentary tonight. Jerry?
Thanks, Norma. We have to listen. I didn't say we have to agree, but we have to listen. We have to respond. We have to hear what he's saying, because he's the only national politician left who talks to those who have nothing to do with the system or the suits who run it. The president motorcades through L.A. Clinton says what he's going to do, and Perot at least suggests that he's working on an answer. But as sincere as these guys might be, to the folks on the streets and in the ghettos and on the unemployment line, living poor, real poor, to them it's all a bunch of words and promises never kept. It's just election time, so the rhetoric flows, but not the commitment, and certainly not the money. Cynicism rages in America's inner cities. I mean, just a rumor of a police shooting started a riot in Minneapolis. It turned out, of course, not to be true. A cop didn't shoot anybody. But even just the rumor was enough to ignite the short fuse of discontent that currently pervades urban America. Forget who's to blame. It's too late for that. The fact is, 3rd and 4th generation poor folk don't believe any of us anymore. Our institutions have helped rip their families apart. There's no base, no education, no economic support. The supremely gifted make it out, but most, of course, don't. And they don't believe politicians give a damn, except to get their vote and agree to keep the peace. Except for Jesse Jackson, that is. He is a bridge across troubled waters. The disenfranchised do listen to him because he really does listen to them. And he hears their cries. And we can slough him off. We can say, oh, that's just Jesse Jackson grandstanding again, and choose to ignore him. But if we do so at our own peril. We ignore a gifted voice and a valuable conduit to a part of America we haven't let in. Simply put, if we don't find room for Jesse Jackson and the forgotten and alienated Americans he represents, if we chase these folks out of the system, what avenue is left for them to vent their anger? If the politicians won't listen, if the courts won't listen, if the media won't listen, if we keep chasing them away, we will eventually chase them onto the streets. And then suddenly we'll cry, oh, Jesse, could you help us? But then it'll be too late, even for him. Maybe we ought to listen to him now. Some of the things he says seem kind of funny, but not listening to him's a riot.
In commentary tonight. Now the running mates have had their day. Certainly a more strident affair than Sunday night's debate. Will it sway the voters at all? The subject of Jerry's commentary. Jerry?
Thanks, Norma. But for its entertainment value, providing political pundits something to talk about and comics something to joke about, vice presidential debates are as meaningless as the vice presidency. I know a president could die or become incapacitated or be otherwise chased from office, as has too often happened in our lifetime, and then the vice president would have to take over. But as we've noticed in past elections, particularly in the last one, voters will laugh about the running mate, cheer him or ridicule him, but will hardly ever let the number 2 spot on the ticket dictate whether they'll vote for the number 1 spot, that is, how they'll vote for president. Surely no vice president in the modern era has been so universally panned as Dan Quayle, and so lowly held, according to the polls, in public esteem, and yet it didn't stop George Bush from winning in a veritable landslide back in 1988.
So unlike the presidential debates, where how the candidates come off is significant in swaying undecided voters, how Quayle, Gore, and Stockdale did tonight doesn't matter a hoot, other than it gave each of them a chance to blast away at the head of the other guy's ticket. So Quayle could go after Clinton's character, Gore could lament the condition Bush has left America in, and Stockdale, well, he could simply echo Perot and say, plague on both your houses. We need a clean sweep in Washington. So go ahead, let's all argue over who won tonight, whether Quayle was better than expected, whether Gore was as good as predicted, and whether Stockdale did okay for a guy we never even heard of. But remember this, it doesn't matter. If you don't believe me, ask Lloyd Benston. Back in '88, he did great.